Dr. Donna Walton is a speaker, author, and disabilities advocate. She spent the last few decades rebuilding her world after her battle with a very unique and dangerous bone cancer. Help me out here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It was a bone
Osteogenic
cancer.
sarcoma.
I was trying to say
Yeah,
it, but I
it's
didn't.
okay. It's
Okay.
okay. It's okay.
Well,
Absolutely.
it's very dangerous and it's very unique. It's a bone cancer that caused her to amputate her left leg from the knee up. This is her autobiography, Shattered Dreams, Broken Pieces. We're going to talk about this today and her ability to battle the different adversities that came her way and how she met them head on and conquered. Thank you for joining the show
Thank you very
today.
much for having me.
I apologize for the slip up
Absolutely.
there.
Hey, it's okay. Those are hard words.
Those are hard words.
Those are hard words.
But I'm very interested about your story. We usually
Sure.
start here with people's background. So we could share a bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I'm a native Washingtonian,
Really? Okay.
born and raised in D.C.,
Wonderful.
educated in D.C. public schools. Was always endowed with the spirit of knowing that I was going to be great.
Right.
Had a life transforming experience at age 18.
18.
In 1976, I had to have my left leg amputated above the knee for that word, osteogenic sarcoma. But I took that experience and used it as a trajectory to not go to Hollywood, but
Really?
use my world as my stage and sort of transform my life into acting, well, advocating, being an advocate, writing, speaking, on behalf of persons with disabilities, and with persons with disabilities and persons who may think they're disabled.
Right. So what's the difference there? There's folks who are disabled, folks who think they are disabled.
Well, disability is can be a state of mind. Okay,
Sure.
from my experience, of course, mine is a physical disability. But if persons think they're disabled, they're sort of encumbered by procrastination. They're encumbered by not sort of living the best life that they can live. Living from negative experiences as opposed to a more positive experience. That's
Right.
that's the disability. When you're not living your best
Absolutely.
life and you're
Absolutely.
encumbered by things that really have no purpose, then you're disabled.
Yes, and that is far from what you've demonstrated.
Absolutely,
As
absolutely.
you've written a book, that lack of procrastination there, living your best life, going out, and you starting foundations and sharing your experience with others. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, that's a great question because the book really had to be written. I experienced cancer at a time when it was, people were not talking about cancer. And at 18, I had to sort of endure this whole kind of experience.
What was that like?
It was very difficult. I mean, that's a very sort of trite word to use, but it was very difficult. But the reason why I had to write the book is because I experienced cancer and sort of coming to life, if you will, when there was not any resources for Black women in particular.
Right.
And there was no role model, right? And I was able to sort of survive this whole lived experience of disability, if you will, or being an amputee, without any examples.
Right.
And I became very good at it. And then I saw my dreams being manifested, not by what I thought I was going to be doing, which was going to be acting. You could
Right.
not tell me I was not going to be in Hollywood, right? But what happened was that all of my sort of, every time I got motivation or I guess confirmation that I was going to be living, then I started to do just that.
Right.
So I would write stories. I would lead individuals, and it seems like they were always interested in how did you do that. And it wasn't a matter of how did I do that. It was a matter of that's who I was.
Right.
It was an intrinsic, it was just in me to know that I was going to live, and I was going to show others how they can live their best life. And that,
Right.
that term is being used now, but I was living the best I could
Right.
at the time. And so the book really kind of incorporates three sort of tenets, right? It talks about faith. It talks about that. That's what was my anchor.
Okay.
Having being steeped in faith, right? For some, it could be Buddha. For me, it is God. And I basically believed that each day that I was surviving, that I could do something different. And through that, I accomplished my bachelor's, my master's, and ultimately my doctorate,
Sure.
based on that faith, because it wasn't always difficult. It wasn't always easy, I should say. And then, the book also is anchored in resilience, because there were times when, and the book talks about this, having naysayers, right? Having dream busters, saying what you weren't going to be able to do, and having society, sort of the discrimination, the prejudice, the all the isms, being black, female, disabled, coming at you.
Right.
So I had to go and endure those type of things. And then lastly, the book is anchored in reinvention. Now, I think that that's the real key, because that is the piece that has shown me along my journey that no matter where you start, doesn't mean that that's where you end.
Right.
So I started off, 18 years old, bone cancer, rehabilitation, you name it, the negative, no dates. Okay. I mean, it was tough.
Sure.
And so, the whole reinvention piece was, you can retool, rebrand, reshape, who you are, and you can become even better than that. You can come, I guess you could say, you'll turn out better sometimes than you were before. And I think I'm a much better person than I was before. And I'm still evolving.
Absolutely.
I'm still evolving because I'm still learning. And I take what I have now and I help other women.
Yes.
So I'm on this journey now. I've created this organization called the Divas with Disabilities Project. Now, it grew out of a Facebook sort of interactive piece where I would just go on and talk to young women.
Sure.
And then found out that this was something that there was a void. There was
There's a gap there.
there was a major gap, people weren't talking about it to one another. Our community sometimes is very private, and particularly if you're exposing a piece about yourself that you may not want other persons to know, even though there's a lot of pride in being disabled. I mean, it's disability pride. I mean, and that's why I embrace the word
Right.
versus turning away from it. I mean, I'm not disabled. That's a different type of word, right? But certainly, I do live with a disability, and with that, there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of activism
Right.
that comes with that. There's a lot of culture that is within disability.
Sure.
But these women, we've galvanized on this platform, and then we've sort of moved away from that. So now our mission is to raise the image, to raise the awareness, I should say, and change the perception of what disability looks like.
And what are some of those perceptions that you've been living with, or that society has cast on you?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's a question that you wouldn't think is kind of the answer is kind of
Right.
obvious.
Because, one of my aunts is disabled, so it's been a part of my life as far back as I can remember, whether it's helping her to the car or picking up something for her
Absolutely.
running. And it's just,
Absolutely.
I don't think about it until my sister and we have conversations. Oh, she's disabled, when we don't think of her that way.
Yeah, and she's not disabled actually,
Or she has a disability.
She has a disability, right? She's a person with a disability. We like to we like to put the person first in terms of characterizing
Sure.
individuals with different types of abilities, as some people say. So the perceptions is that you are not able to, right?
Right.
It's so inherent in that what you're not able to. And I'll give you a classic example.
Okay.
So when I was going through therapy, rehabilitation, physical therapy, it was quite comical because I was expected to wear a particular type of shoe. Now, this is back in the 70s, of course, and I'm not trying to down the hush puppy, but the hush puppy was supposed to be my shoe, and it was sort of like your fashion at that point was somewhat
Limited.
yeah, I mean, it was somewhat given to you that this is how you're supposed to look. That you're
Right.
not supposed, as a woman with a disability, certainly you're not thinking about being fashionable, right? So that was one perception, that you're not supposed to look a certain way,
Right.
that you're supposed to look disabled. And I'll give you another example. I drive a sports car. I can pull up into a parking space embossed with the handicap, symbol, and people will really come up to me and
sure.
yell penalties, like how dare you park in that space? Who you think you are? And it's based on the torso, right?
Right.
Because they have no idea that I do walk with a cane, I do walk with the limp, and I am entitled to that parking space. But the perception is that how dare you have a sports car, right? And look relatively attractive, and be parked in that parking space. I mean, there are many examples I could offer you, and I guess the last example I can offer you came from a second grader.
Okay.
In
Recently,
terms-
or
No,
when
this
you
is
were-
this. I guess I should give you that context. So, along my journey, I've taught school. I have, I've done many things. Okay, primarily been in disability policy, training
Right.
programs. But my first beginnings, my humble beginnings, is where I think the foundation of my learning, understanding, and
Right.
appreciation for lifelong learning started when I taught second grade.
Okay.
And so this particular second grader, who I will not call his name out, he said to me, he walked to my desk one day and he said, "Miss Walton," he said, "no man will ever marry you." And, startled.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, why would you say something like that?" And he said, "Why would a man marry a woman with one leg?" So you see, at very young, it shows you how the prejudice and the stereotypes and the stigma has been imposed on a
Right.
second grader to
Right.
think that, wow, because my teacher has one leg, it's no way, she's doomed. No man's gonna be bothered with that, right? And so that showed me on my early parts of my journey that it was going to be tough.
Right.
It was going to be tough because the perceptions
Right.
of how a person with a disability is supposed to live.
And what was the dating scene like for you? You mentioned.
Tough.
Yeah.
Tough, very tough. And I'll tell you why. And it wasn't tough because, dating is hard anyway.
Absolutely.
I don't know your story,
Absolutely.
but dating's hard. But first of all, I went from a vibrant, very confident woman, young girl, to knowing that my stuff didn't stink, so to speak, right? To what's, I guess, being confronted by men who say things like, what's wrong with you? Well, you're too pretty to look like that,
Right.
or, walk with a cane, or walk with the limp, and I've never dealt with something like this before. And I mean, all these things are somewhat okay, because I mean, not everybody's walking into meeting an amputee on a daily, but it becomes difficult because of lookisms.
Right.
We as a society are really judged on how we look, how we show
Absolutely.
up, right? I mean, you could show up the way you look, but I mean, you might even be judged because, he's wearing sneakers, or he's wearing, but when a woman is judged by a man, it's typically based on her physical appearance. And though I was very confident in my physical appearance, but it's not something that men are just comfortable with at the start. So you have to get to know her stage. And during that period of my journey, and still today, it's not always that simple.
Right. And
It's a lot of you have to somewhat either show up unapologetically as I'm an amputee, this is what it is, this is not going to change, or you hide behind a screen, which is online dating.
Right.
And that becomes a challenge as well.
Right. And I'm assuming here, in those kind of relationships, or in even more platonic or personal relationships, folks, you become more comfortable with your situation before folks are, right?
Absolutely.
So can you speak to that experience and being, like you mentioned, confident within yourself?
Well, that's a very good point. How do you show? How do you? Well, first of all, it's not my responsibility to make you comfortable.
Right.
However, it does show that when people with disabilities, such as myself, show up unapologetically in their space, confidently, then it does put you at ease and let you see that, oh, okay, I don't have to walk on eggshells, so to speak. You know, I can be myself. I tend to show up in a way that allows individuals to ask me questions. I'm sometimes offended if the first thing you ask me is what happened to you. That's really not cool, and I can tell it's not going to be a good day.
Right.
If that's the first thing you have to say to me. But the way, I would say the best way, or that I put individuals at ease, is that, I just show up and be honest with, if I want to share with you what happened to me, I will tell you. But otherwise, I interact just like you and me. I mean, that's the thing. There's no difference.
There's no difference, right?
There's no difference. I mean, and I think that's what society is looking for. Well, how am I supposed to treat, with respect, same way you treat anyone else, right? With respect, with dignity, with, Yeah, it's not a hard thing to do, but trust me, we're in this phase of life where it is very hard being included. Persons with disabilities, particularly Black women with disabilities, their voices are muted. They just really are not being heard.
How has your race played, or your ethnicity played, a factor in your experience?
Well, that's interesting as well, because we I sort of live on this triple jeopardy sort of scale,
right,
whereby my race, my gender, and my disability are interacting all the time. And there's an intersection of where these identities are sometimes and oftentimes discriminated on, right? I mean, and the interesting thing is, I never know sometimes which of those is in operation. Classic example, had an interview with a a television station, and I will never call names. Showed up for the interview. I was ready. I was prepared. This was during my early journey as well. When I was, like I said, I was bound for Hollywood, so I was doing everything I could do to get there. So I showed up for this interview, and the interviewer, everything was going well, and then he asked me the question, well, if you had to run for the story, how would you get the story? Well, see, at that point, I knew what was operating right then, right? It was the disability, right?
Yeah.
So that was just obvious. But there are other times when you know that you're the best qualified person for a particular job, and you leave out, and you just don't know which of those variables, because
are playing
out.
Wow. And throughout your experience, you've done a lot of incredible things, one of which was earning your doctorate.
Yes.
Can you tell me or share with us that experience of getting through school? I understand that you had the operation in your freshman year.
Yeah, actually, that was my sophomore year. That was an interesting experience because cancer was actually.
And you still graduated on time.
And so the way I say the universe had it, or the way that God planned it. Let's not play with the terms here. The way that God planned it is that I graduated early from H.D. Woodson, and I was supposed to graduate in 75. I came out in 74.
Okay.
So I went to, undergraduate school. I went to Point Park College, as a matter of fact, if anybody's out there, Point Park College, performing arts school.
Okay.
Because, again, knew I was going to be that performer. And came back home to D.C., missing a boyfriend. That's in the book, missing a boyfriend. But anyway, it was all in the plan, because then I came home and I transferred to American University, where I pursued my degree
Right.
until I was in 1976. So that semester, it was my sophomore
Okay.
semester. And that was a very difficult,
I can imagine.
returning to school.
Returning to college.
Yes.
Yeah.
Returning to college, absolutely. Living on campus, now on crutches and getting used to a prosthetic, it was extremely challenging. I do not want to go back there. But that was all about the journey.
Right.
But the doctorate experience was a totally different experience because now I kind of know myself now, right? But there are access barriers. There's accessibility issues now.
Right.
So I have who I am, right, to get through this program, this rigorous program. But then there are these other barriers that were I was encumbered by. For example, most individuals will, and this snowy weather we've been having,
Yep.
no big deal for individuals sometimes. The streets clear, you're good, right? Well, for me in college, that was major. That was a major shutdown because I drove to school, and then you would have to park.
Yeah.
And then the curbs and snow, and so it was a lot of barriers.
Right.
At American University, this was a time. This was pre ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So very little was accessible.
Right.
So I was climbing stairs all the time. But what got me through it was that it was another thing. It was another, I guess, indication that I was going to be great. So I had to do it. And God had given me the opportunity to live because, the pieces that are in the book that I'm sure we don't have enough time to explore here is that my cancer, I did not complete all the treatments for my cancer. So I walked out on chemotherapy. Now,
Right.
I don't say that proudly and boldly or brashly to encourage anyone to do that. But that was my time. That was my time. That was my journey. And that was my message that I used to just live my life. If it was
Right.
my destiny, then I was going to be out of that hospital, no chemo. So each year gave me courage. So I knew that if I could survive that, if I made it that far from
Right.
1976 when I was told, if you stop this, you're done. And I'm here.
What did, if you don't mind me asking me, what?
Sure. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. What inspired you to stop the chemotherapy there?
Well, see, again, it wasn't even about inspired. It was about being. It was. How can you describe this? It was ordained. It was just ordained. It was something that everyone has their own personal experience, their own faith.
Right.
For me, it was what I had my talk with God, and it was just that. It was that if this is my destiny, then I would prefer to live it outside of this hospital. Because again, all the statistics were saying,
No.
this is it, right? So I'm like, well, I wasn't ready to accept that. So I decided to not take any more chemotherapy. And I mean, I took 6 treatments out of 18. And decided that was just going to be it.
Yeah.
So each success that I had in my life along my journey, whether it was getting a bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and ultimately my doctorate degree, were just all indications that my life was going to be it's all right, right?
All right.
It's going to be all right.
And you touched on this, but I do want to ask directly, what is the difference between saying someone is disabled and saying someone has a disability?
Well, actually, it's just basically you put the person first. You just personalize it. You're not just saying that person is disabled because the
Right.
person is not disabled. It's a person.
It's a person.
With a disability. So it's just a matter of being politically correct.
Absolutely. And I do want to circle back to Divas with Disabilities.
Yes.
Can you touch more on what you guys are doing now?
Absolutely. Well, right now we just became our 501c3.
Wow.
So we're just
Congratulations.
extremely awesome. That is just amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so what we're doing, and we have a couple initiatives that we're
Okay.
working on. One is the Diva State of Mind initiative,
Okay.
whereby it sort of is a double entendre. Mind being, the psychological state, state being where the person lives, the state of mind, the psychological state of mind. And what we're doing is we have divas all over the country. We have 2 in Ghana, 1 in Kenya that we're really excited about,
Really?
and 1 in Uganda that we're trying to still work.
That's awesome.
Trying to work out
Yeah.
to try to be these diva ambassadors. And what they will do is they will have these sort of coalitions and be, give empowerment, education, resource, be a support system to those black women in other countries. And then in America, in the U.S., of course, what we do is we have the same type of global diva ambassadors in different states
Okay.
that have meetup groups and do the same thing, which will culminate into the national conference once we have that. The other major initiative that we're doing right now is for Hollywood.
Okay,
We
wow.
want to basically show that people with disabilities, black women with disabilities, we're very, very much underrepresented,
Right.
right? So we want to be in Hollywood. We want to have roles. So the Divas with Disabilities project is creating a pipeline of qualified actors, if you will, black
Right.
women who can fill these spots. I mean, you've probably heard a lot in the news and probably seen that there are a lot of characters who play, disabled,
roles. Yeah.
but they're not disabled.
Right.
So that's a big issue when we know that I could play the role.
Qualified folks. Okay.
Yeah. So that's one of the projects that Divas is working on right now.
And I do want to ask you about that experience, or I guess that reality, that when you had the amputation, you had these dreams of becoming an actress. When that world kind of shifted, you mentioned that you still have the opportunity to live out your dreams. It was all about perspective.
It really was. What I tried to do, Quentin, was I tried to I think what I did is that I transformed, right, the idea of being in Hollywood and use the classroom, the world as my stage. And then I'm able to act out any role I want. So, I do that through, like I said, through my writings, through speaking. I do a lot of motivational speaking, and I really just like to think of it as a lot of speaking.
Right.
If I happen to be motivating, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's really, my goal is to just really give a message, right? To tell my story and to talk about how important it is to know your truth. And it's really important. I have 25 principles in the book
Yeah.
for
thank you.
reinvention, right?
Absolutely.
And though I can't name them all on today, I can clearly tell you that the number one is to live your life with a purpose.
Absolutely.
Have a purpose. And then there's another one that, that talks about the naysayers. It's another one that says sing your song. There's another one that says, be authentic, live by your own value system, not by someone that say a prayer, right? There are many. There are 25 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, it's not a cookbook. It's not a self-help book, if you will, but it certainly gives you, hey, like I said, I experienced what I did in a time when there were no role models. There wasn't a lot of information, on how to live. My best example, if you will, when I was in the hospital, the doctors were talking to me about Edward Kennedy Jr. I'm like, what does that have to do with Donna Walton?
Yeah.
Well, because he skied, right? Like, oh, okay. So, well, I wanted to dance, right? Wasn't interested in skiing, but so there were no examples. So my book, gives those examples, gives ways of like, okay, well, this is what it looked like for me, and not to say that you have to do this, but certainly you could probably borrow from it, and it may help you. The title of the book, Shattered Dreams, Broken Pieces, really comes from the notion that, I had a shattered dream. It was my idea, like I said, was to be in Hollywood, to be in somebody's movie, right? And then the pieces. The broken pieces are just all of those little disparate things that happen in my life, right? Boyfriends leaving, you just name it,
Sure.
starting in school, you know, life goes on because you live with a disability. It doesn't
Right.
change.
Change, right.
Your lived experience is, it's the same.
Right.
You just have to do it a little differently,
Absolutely.
maybe a little slower too.
Absolutely. And we're kind of running out of time here. So I would love for you to share the quote that you share about making opportunities for yourself with the audience.
Well, there's two quotes that I really like.
Okay.
So I'll share this one with you. If what you want is not behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, don't settle for less. Knock a hole in the wall and make a new door. And the other one,
that a lot.
yeah, yeah. And the other quote I use, I think is very valuable for when you're getting these messages from yourself, and that is, your thoughts can be either a fierce army marching to destroy you, or compassionate paramedics coming to your rescue. So think about that when you're thinking about sabotaging yourself, because sometimes we're our best saboteurs,
Absolutely.
right?
Every time.
We're talking about putting something about someone down. We can sometimes put ourselves down, and always remember to affirm yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where can they pick up the book?
Well, you can pick up the book at, of course, you can, I guess, access the book from Amazon.com, and you can also, I think it's Books A Million. You can also get it from my website at DonnaWalton.com.
DonnaWalton.com. Well, I want to thank you for
Thank
coming on the
you.
show. Shattered Dreams, Broken Pieces. You can pick it up on Amazon. You can join us next week and join us with our conversation with Oscar winner Russell Williams. He'll be on the show giving us his experience in creating these beautiful soundscapes that we know and love. As I always tell you every week, if no one has told you that they love you today, remember that I do and I always will. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.